A very potential area where we can minimize the costs of running the property in the area of verifying we have paid appropriate prices is in the purchasing function. And while most of the property managers have reasonable systems in place to verify purchasing, we're not always finding that work orders and purchase orders are included in the packages of paid bills that we find. So we have some suggestions in those areas that we'd like to add as part of the best practices guidelines and the specific controls that we can add in this aspect of the operations of your property. Let's just remember that the specific controls are those that are established by one or several board members in order to personalize the situation and enhance the controls. And we always have this concern that they can be lost due to change in the board or in the property manager. So it's important that they be memorialized in either written format and policies and procedures manual or some aspect that we can make sure that they continue. On the building staff issue, we want to make sure that things are done timely and at the time they're supposed to be, so that for maintenance items, schedules and checklists are very important to be utilized and to be verified. We want to enhance the living of the people in the building and minimize our costs. So purchasing can be for recurring as well as non-recurring items. We'll talk more about recurring later. There's a difference in that we're purchasing supplies or items that we're going to use in the building and having services come in and do work in the building. So we'll talk about the differences later in those two sections. We want to maximize the usage of our employees to limit outside contractor use. So there are ways of doing this. One is we make sure that they get the specific training they need to be able to service the components of our building. Another is we offer them potentially additional compensation for doing that, so that that's ultimately cheaper than using an outside contractor. On the purchase side, we want to utilize purchase orders. Now these are usually multi-colored pages attached to one form, so there should be one color that's attached to the invoice when it's presented for payment. These should be pre-numbered so we can keep track of them, and they should be a log maintained as to what happened to all the purchase orders. So that would include the ones that were never filled, those that were void. We also want to make sure in purchasing that there's a system to maintain documentation of competitive proposals. We always find it's easy to find the proposal that was accepted, but it's very difficult to track down that there were multiple proposals. So we want to make sure that the board is seeing multiple proposals. We want to make sure that there is approval of the purchase and that the goods were received. So that's very important also that those take place. And there should be some type of approval process in place that verifies both of those items. On the service side, we want to make sure that there's a service request form when a service is required, or a work ticket to make sure that a work was required. And this is important because we can evaluate the work to see what could be charged back for unit owners. So not only are we controlling the cost and making sure that we only do work when it's approved, but when we potentially can bill it back, we're capturing that information and we're making sure we bill it back. When we do bill it back, we want to make sure that we have prescribed charge listings to make sure that we charge back a set amount, or we have for employee services also. Our work tickets or service requests should also be pre-numbered. They should be in a log system to make sure that all of them are evaluated for bill back, and we verify that we have the actual approval to make sure that we're utilizing the best possible controls over work being done. And then there needs to be a monitoring system in place to verify that all those that should have been billed back actually made it into the accounting system. This sometimes is where the breakdown is. There's almost a presumption that everything makes it, but it doesn't always happen. We would like you to also consider using requisition forms when supplies are taken out of inventory. That way there's a way to track the amount of items that are coming out. These supplies can be used by employees either in personal businesses or at home, and we want to make sure that there's an approval system when they come out. We want to make sure that our receiving reports and packing slips are kept together and attached to the invoice to make sure that we did get these documents. It's important to maintain the documentation of the competitive bids and keep that in prescribed files. On the recurring side, in order to make sure that there's not changes in pricing in the industry, that we end up getting periodic reviews of items that we get on an annual basis. So services and contracts should be done at least once a year to make sure that there's not a new vendor that would be at a different pricing structure, or our vendor's pricing structure has changed. This encourages evaluation of the vendor and ends up helping to minimize the costs as well.